There's a record in American sports no one brags about.
Who has the longest championship drought amongst the Big Four leagues?
Buffalo Bills.
No good. Wide right.
No.
The New York Jets?
No.
The Sacramento Kings?
It's not the correct answer.
Oh!
With a fan base that is statistically the most miserable in all of sports.
The Leafs have to be up there, right?
They are not the longest.
Either because they're the losers in the stories we all know, or just because they flat out choked.
Washington Commanders?
Incorrect.
This is a record that nobody talks about.
What about the Chargers? Detroit Lions?
The Guardians?
It belongs to a state in the middle of the country that's quietly become the most cursed place in pro sports. This is the story of America's longest sports drought, and the psychic we hired to find out how it ends.
Well, there is superstition and magic in sports.
But we'll get to that later. I'll be honest, I'm not a sports analyst. I don't even know who these guys are, but I do know that their guesses are all wrong. And I think I have the answer to who the most cursed fan base really is, because I am a part of it. So I called Dan Birkin, creator of ChampsOrChumps.com, the official scoreboard for losing.
I created the site in 2014 after, I think, over 2 decades of just DC sports mediocrity, because I wanted to make sure the masses understood the suffering that DC had gone through.
Now it's the internet's go-to ranking for sports pain by tracking championship droughts across the big four sports, the NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL. Not in years, but in seasons, because every team, every year, is another shot at failure.
The city with the 4th longest season drought is something nobody would ever guess, which is New York.
Amazingly, New York has not won a major championship in 14 years. It's their longest drought in over a century.
New York just has so many teams. Every year the New York team doesn't win, they pile up 8 more years.
Okay, and who's in the top 3?
So San Diego has had quite a bit of misery. And even worse, they've lost all their teams.
Their only remaining chance to break the curse is the Padres. What about number 2?
We move 1 up on the active list to Buffalo.
Buffalo has also never won a major championship. They literally have nothing to celebrate. And the Buffalo Bills lost an iconic 4 Super Bowls in a row.
But then we get to number 1 on the active list, and the longest current drought belongs to Minnesota.
As a Minnesota fan, it's nice to be the best at something.
Now, this drought in particular is currently 124 seasons long. It's gone 33 years. None of the 4 Minnesota teams have even made a finals since 1991. There have just been absolute ranges, decades of just terrible seasons.
All right, take it easy, jeez. He's right, though. These numbers don't look good. But in 1991, Minnesota was on top of the world. And Minnesota had with it an American hero. In Game 6 of the World Series, he hits the walk-off home run to force Game 7, in which they become national champions, the kind of moment that cements legends. But 5 years later, out of nowhere, and this is completely true, he wakes up blind. The curse has struck.
The only regret I have about this game at all is that I know I could have done so much better if I could have played. But then again, that's 2020. Something else could have happened. I mean, who knows?
Kirby Puckett is forced to retire, and Minnesota plunges into decades of heartbreak.
It's just an incredible drought in terms of the breadth of the different types of ways that these teams have managed not to win a championship year in and year out.
The ways Minnesota loses, that's the real story. So to unpack that psychological trauma, I called Dave Schwartz, former sports reporter and current Minnesota Wild staffer, the perfect person to confirm that Minnesota is cursed.
I don't believe in curses, and so here's why, and I'll be truthful with you about this. I think every fan base, other than maybe in New York or Boston or LA, I think every fan base thinks that they're cursed. I just think we're just unlucky.
Fine, Dave. I'll set up the story then. It was 1999, and the Minnesota Vikings had the best record in football. 15 wins and 1 loss.
3 teams have been 15-1 in the history of the National Football League. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Touchdown, Vikings! Oh, touchdown!
They were Super Bowl favorites, but the game to get them there, the 1999 NFC Championship, came down to one final kick. Just 30 yards, a tap in.
So basically a chip shot.
And Anderson hasn't missed in 2 years.
I mean, come on, the guy hadn't missed all season. Literally, he made every single kick.
Anderson is connected on 46 consecutive field goals.
Gary Anderson had the first ever perfect season.
For Gary Anderson, this was a gimme.
So that's a pretty good bet. If you say, do you think Gary Anderson will make this field goal? The answer should probably be yes.
You know, kicking a field goal is not easy. One little thing off the wrong way, a step that's not a full step. You didn't get your laces the right way. Maybe the spot or the hold wasn't exactly where it needed to be.
But none of that mattered because this was the moment, the kick that would send Minnesota to the Super Bowl.
You know, we as common folk cannot understand what that pressure's like. Standing there over the ball saying, if I kick this, we're going to the Super Bowl.
Field goal, the answer should probably be yes.
39 yards away. And it's not good.
And then he missed. And Minnesota goes on to lose in overtime. And it becomes one of the most infamous heartbreaks in sports history.
I mean, this is where it's hard to say that there's not a curse, but even though I don't believe there's one.
And Gary Anderson ends up being the most hated man in Minnesota. Do you think it's an injustice that, like, this is how we remember this guy?
Yeah, because he was a really good kicker. He was a great kicker. I mean, I don't believe that sports comes down to one moment. It's dominoes. Every moment that happens is dictated by the moment or moments leading up to it. And so I think all of that pressure and all of that happening is what, to me, what I take away from it.
That was just the first dagger. There would be more. Many more. In 1993, the curse came for hockey. And it didn't just take the soul of the team, it took the entire team.
It is official, the Minnesota North Stars will be no more in Minnesota. They're packing their bags, they're off to Dallas.
I want to finish my career out here.
The state of hockey no longer had a hockey team.
You lost the lifeblood of what people do in our community, in our state. So it was a huge hit.
Sad situation.
We need hockey. Minnesota needs a hockey team.
Then in 1999, just after that famous missed field goal, the Dallas Stars win the Stanley Cup.
The Dallas Stars! Brett Favre! They won the Stanley Cup! Deep in the heart of Texas, the Stars are shining!
I can only imagine that all of our 10,000 lakes were filled with tears. It would be like losing your girlfriend and watching her going to prom with somebody else, and you're just sitting there outside.
Are you okay? Is this like a drawing personal memories back for you?
Possibly. My yeah, I don't quite remember. It's been a long time. But that's what it's like. And you're sitting there outside the dance, looking inside, going, boy, it sure'd be nice to be in there.
Makes me mad. This makes the whole state of Minnesota mad, basically, just to summarize it all up.
The curse took Minnesota's team and it let them win without them. But what the curse takes, the curse gives back.
A few more hours could wipe the slate clean and leave 7 years of pain in the past.
Welcome to the XL Energy Center and the National Hockey League's return to Minnesota.
It was huge. The state has embraced them.
And in just their third season, the Minnesota Wild put their mark on the NHL by going on a playoff run and making it to the Western Conference Final. It felt like maybe, just maybe, Minnesota would get payback.
Because when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs, truly you don't know. And if you get there, you could go on a run.
Until they got swept by Disney's team, the Mighty Ducks.
The Ducks go to the Stanley Cup Final!
But in 2004, Minnesota's NBA team took center court. They had NBA MVP Kevin Garnett.
You're talking about 3 bona fide stars on any team in the NBA.
There was just one problem. A familiar opponent stood in the way. Not familiar because they were dominant. No, not yet. Familiar because they used to be the Timberwolves. The Lakers moved to Los Angeles in 1960, a city with no lakes. Don't fact check me on that one. So now, Minnesota's best basketball team ever, led by one of the greatest to ever do it, had to get past their former self. A team that just so happened to have Shaq and a relatively unknown guy named Kobe Bryant.
fans here in Minneapolis are hoping the T-Wolves will lift their spirits.
You already know how this ends.
Want to take it back home. Kareem Rush. And the Los Angeles Lakers have defeated the Minnesota Timberwolves in 6.
Somebody had to lose so the legend could begin. Turns out, it was the Timberwolves.
I think that was the team. I think a lot of people thought that was the team that was going to go and win it all.
Just a few years later, Minnesota would have their next chance. Brett Favre was Minnesota's public enemy number 1.
Some of the guys, they're already looking at Brett Favre like he was the Dalai Lama. Favre, that come in and whoop our ass. So that's why we kind of brought that jersey in to kind of get guys, just a number. He's just up in Lambeau Field with a bunch of cheese and stuff. Don't mean
Favre was the Green Bay Packers. He torched the Vikings for over a decade. He was cocky, reckless, almost mythic.
I gotta see this. This Favre out here. Brett Favre.
He was the gunslinger. That was what made Brett Favre such a great player, is that he was willing to take risks where other quarterbacks wouldn't take the risk. I'm on one foot and I got a guy 70 yards downfield. Why not just chuck it and see?
Touchdown! Green Bay leads! Brett Favre!
And then he retired.
I've given everything I possibly can give to this organization, to the game of football. And I don't think I got anything left to give, and that's it.
Then unretired.
He's the newest member of the New York Jets. Number 4, Brett Favre, acquired in a trade.
Brett Favre has called it a career. Again.
Then, I think, unretired again? But what people don't know, this was a grudge.
Yeah, I think it was to stick it to Green Bay. I truly do. I think when they drafted Aaron Rodgers, he took that as an insult.
In 2009, Brett Favre did the unthinkable and suited up in a Vikings uniform.
I wanted to play for anyone who would play the Packers. Minnesota played them twice.
This was personal.
Green Bay fans are really angry. I mean, really angry.
And he had a loaded roster with him. Adrian Peterson in his prime.
Adrian Peterson, look at that shot!
Goodness.
Jared Allen on defense.
And it's going to be Jared Allen!
It was what the Vikings were missing at the time.
The 2009 Vikings weren't just good. This was the year.
But the ball is just put in a perfect spot by Brett Favre.
They steamrolled through the season, and standing between them and the Super Bowl was the NFC Championship game. Again.
The winner goes on to Super Bowl 44. It's the NFC Championship game.
This wasn't just any game, though. This is what we now know as Bountygate.
Greg Williams was the defensive coach for the Saints. He was basically paying his players to hit illegally. And they would get like a pool and you'd win money for hurting guys. Favre took a beating. I mean, he took a beating. And so that was Bountygate. That's what it was all about, was basically these guys were being rewarded for playing illegally.
And yet, the game was still tied. Late in the fourth, one more chance at a Super Bowl.
Brett Favre goes back to pass, he pumps. Now he fires over the middle, intercepted. I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. It was intercepted by Tracy Porter. You've got to be kidding me. I can't believe what I just saw. I mean, you can take a knee and try a 56-yard field goal.
Hartley sends the Saints to the Super Bowl.
That pass ended the game, and Brett Favre's last shot at another ring.
Such a sad moment for that team, and the fans to have Brett Favre, and you're going, what is he doing? Why is he forcing the ball in there? Oh gosh, it just got intercepted and it's done. It was that's the downside of having the gunslinger.
Maybe he came back to stick it to Green Bay, but the curse doesn't care about story arcs. The gunslinger rode off into the sunset, and the drought dragged on. If you follow baseball, which I don't, you know one truth. The Yankees are really good, especially against the Twins. Seriously, look it up, it's pretty crazy.
The Yankees had the Twins number. Now to be fair, in the mid-2000s and 2010s, the Yankees had a lot of people's numbers.
But later that year, in 2009, things felt different.
They had some really big bats and some really good players with Mauer and Morneau.
The Twins had Joe Mauer, the batting champ, MVP, and the guy who signed a baseball for me in second grade. They clawed their way into game 136, a tiebreaker with the Tigers. With the season on the line, in true Minnesota fashion, it went to extra innings.
Very deep and right. And a pitch bounce right side, base hit. Here comes Gomez around third. The Twins have won the Central.
Of all people, Alexi Casillas, his batting average for the year might have been in the low 200s.
For one night, the Metrodome became a cathedral.
But it was a party. This game was emotional. The season was emotional.
This was the year.
And then you take all of that and you get the Yankees.
But first, they'd once again have to face the Yankees.
This place is up for grabs. They are ready to see the Yankees begin a postseason roll tonight.
You already know how this ends. Missed calls, big whiffs.
Fly ball center field. Well hit. At the track, he's done it again.
And the Yankees, led by Alex Rodriguez, the highest paid player in sports, just rolled right through Minnesota.
They just didn't have that guy who stepped up and got it done.
That ended up being the last game ever played in the Metrodome, and the Yankees went on to win the World Series for their 27th time. Hope didn't just die in Minnesota. It literally collapsed.
You know, as a Minnesota fan, your whole ethos is suffering. I think there's like Minnesota fans are sort of like over-indexed in like stats junkies or whatever, because that's all they have. They want stats to explain what's going on.
There are 32 teams in the NFL and the NHL, and 30 teams in the MLB and the NBA. If you don't consider skill and randomly select 2 teams to make the final in each sport, there's a 1 in 8,779 chance that Minnesota would miss the finals 34 years in a row. Those kind of odds can't be explained by players or owners or really anything other than something deeper. So the only logical place to go next would be Ruth Lorden.
I feel good about it. I see good things.
One of the psychics in the Twin Cities gave me one, but I didn't bring it down here with me.
That's when Ruth brought me into the story.
And you have that scar in the third eye, which is really powerful.
So there's not a lot of people that notice that.
Well, not a lot of people have them, but yeah, that's magical. That opens you. That's how you're. That's that. At that point, your third eye was awakened, and that's when you decided to write and do things.
Wow. The scar down the middle of my head comes from when I fell in the fireplace when I was 3 years old. I was born in 1993. That would make the year 1996. The same year Kirby Puckett went blind. Hey. When I split my head open, do you know what time of year that was?
I know it was spring.
Do you know what month it was?
Well, I remember it being close to Mom's birthday, which would have been March.
If I was somehow responsible for blinding Kirby Puckett, the least I could do is try to break the curse. And while there's moment after moment,
the play was offside at 119. Go goal.
After moment,
A chip and a win for FC Dallas.
After moment,
And the kick is no good.
we could talk about all of these and more that lead to this curse. But at this point, only Ruth holds the truth. So a lot of people say Minnesota is cursed with sports.
Yeah. Okay, I believe the problem is a lack of blessing. They haven't done well, maybe the greed, whatever, but they have not been blessed. They need to be blessed.
So it's the
lack
land?
of blessing. Yes, it's spirit. Minnesota is spiritual native land. Other places, they made their deals. That downtown area is spiritual land. You have to bring them to the party because your sports is a party, it's a celebration. You have to invite them in the right way.
While I may have blinded Kirby Puckett, I can't invite the Native Americans to bless the land here because I don't own the land that these massive sports venues sit on. I can't really do anything about it. Except for one thing. If you're one of these guys that does own the land that a sports venue sits on, invite the Native Americans, bless the land, please do it for Minnesota.
That is the thing, like once it ends, this aspect of the identity is just sort of lost forever.